The relationship between progressive candidates and Jewish voters has been a central focus this election cycle. Editor-in-chief of Jewish Insider, Josh Kraushaar, has a new piece titled DSA's Achilles heel goes beyond anti-Semitism. He argues, quote, the reality is that these candidates are politically problematic to the overall public for reasons that go far beyond their views on Jews or Israel. The same Democratic Socialist of America platform that rejects a Jewish state and condones terrorism also is one that envisions abolishing prisons and defunding the police and backs open borders, unquote. Earlier, we discussed the state of the Democratic Party, Jewish voters, as well as Abdul El-Sayed's Michigan Democratic Senate primary victory. Please take a listen. Josh, you've covered politics for a very long time. And you have recently, last 4 years or so, begun to specialize in politics in Jewish America. What's going on, and how do you look at what we saw in Michigan last night as an example?
Well, look, Major, Jews are the news all too often, frankly, if not for all the good reasons lately. And look, the Michigan Senate race was one of the most heated examples that indicated the divides within the Democratic Party. You've seen it on the right. Mm-hmm. We saw that in recent elections. But now the Democratic Party is really facing a reckoning of what ideological direction it wants to go in, and increasingly on issues relating to Israel, Middle East policy, how to deal with anti-Semitism. Those debates and those arguments, and frankly, a tolerance of a more radical view was front and center last night in the Michigan Senate race. We were seeing it in a lot of Democratic primaries across the country.
And with Democratic Socialists of America, even though Abdul El-Sayed is not a member of that part of the Democratic Socialists of America, he has many policies that are somewhat similar, very critical of Israel. Is this trend line within the Democratic Party, from your perspective, Josh, about Israel, about Jews, or is it about Benjamin Netanyahu?
Well, it starts with the fact that even though El-Sayed does not identify as a Democratic socialist, some of his closest allies are on that wing of the party. Bernie, I mean, even going back to when he first ran for statewide office, he ran against Governor Gretchen Whitmer unsuccessfully back in 2018. Bernie Sanders was his biggest champion. Sanders is a small d Democratic socialist. Right. We're now seeing the rise of a capital D party Democratic socialist institution that is even further to the left. Hassan Piker, he's an influencer who
El-Sayed was with the day before the election?
Yeah, I would call him, there's a lot of stories written about his extremism, but he's anti-American, I would say. He supports totalitarian regimes, or said nice things about countries like China, Cuba, and he certainly has been very pro-Hamas, or said things that along the lines of, I would rather support Hamas over the state of Israel. So these are the kind of worldview that someone like Piker represents, and he was campaigning with
and historically
El-Sayed.
Would have been shunned within Democratic circles.
This is the type of candidate, when I talked to strategists involved in the race, they were shocked, even in a Democratic primary, that someone like that would be embraced by a serious candidate for statewide office. But not only was he campaigning with El-Sayed early on, he was I would call him one of the leading surrogates, along with AOC and Bernie Sanders, in the closing weeks of the Michigan Senate primary.
So from where you sit, Josh, where do these things head in the future? Is this something that's going to be on a track that Democrats are going to have to continue to reckon with election cycle after election cycle?
We are in this very strange political moment. It's not just the Democratic Party. You're seeing this on the right as well, where there's an increased tolerance for extreme views, what was considered out of the mainstream, stuff you wouldn't say on the campaign trail.
On the right, it's Holocaust denialism.
Nick Fuentes and Tucker Carlson and people like that. That again, J.D. Vance, and Vice President, was asked if he would condemn some of these figures, and he also kind of tiptoed in a very unusual line on those types of controversial figures. But the extreme is becoming closer to the mainstream. And the penalty that you would pay if you were a serious candidate for office, but in being aligned or embracing some of these very exotic views, is not what it used to be. And that's the test that Michigan is gonna really provide.
And Josh, you mentioned somewhat glibly off the top, the Jews are the news. But for Jews in America, it shows up in polling data all the time. They feel increasingly insecure about their safety, and about their place in the American conversation. That's been a trend line since basically October 7th, 2023. What do you see in that space?
Jewish voters, Jews have always overwhelmingly been Democratic, including in the most recent presidential election. About 65-70% of Jewish voters voted for Kamala Harris. Those Democratic voters, mainly moderate Democratic voters, are now experiencing increasingly politically homeless. They don't necessarily associate themselves with Trump and even
MAGA or America.
They may agree with Trump's policies on Israel, but they don't feel comfortable associating themselves in Trump's Republican Party. But they are estranged increasingly from the Democratic Party that they once called home. I think moderates overall, like if you're a moderate, if you're kind of a centrist Democrat, we call it the establishment leaders of the party are losing power, losing influence. Chuck Schumer, had very little say in the trajectory of his candidate, Haley Stevens. But you're also seeing Jews caught in the middle because they tend to be more moderate, more mainstream, and this radical view towards Israel and towards the Middle East that's percolating within the party is kind of drawing the Jewish vote out of the equation.
You can listen to my full interview with Josh Kraushaar on your favorite podcast platform.